Egypt looks, on a map, like a country that has everything figured out. A vast and confident square of territory, covering over 1 million square kilometers. A landmass large enough to contain France, Spain, and Germany, with room to spare. A nation whose sheer size seems to suggest a kind of geographical abundance. And yet, that map is perhaps the most misleading image in all of human cartography. If you look at Egypt not as a political border, but as a populated place, as the collection of locations where people actually live and work and build their lives, the picture that emerges is almost incomprehensible in its strangeness. It is a thin green line threading through an ocean of yellow, a ribbon of life so narrow and so precise that astronauts on the International Space Station can trace it with a finger against the darkness of the Sahara below. Along that ribbon, pressed together with a density that rivals the most crowded cities on Earth, live more than 110 million people. Virtually the entire population of one of the world's most ancient and storied civilizations, occupying just 3% of their country's total land area. While the remaining 97% sits empty, silent, and essentially uninhabitable, not because of neglect or poverty or political failure, but because of something far older and far more absolute than any human decision. Because the desert that surrounds that green line is not merely dry or hot or difficult. It is the Sahara, the largest hot desert on the planet. Rainfall is not just scarce there, it is functionally non-existent. Temperatures swing between extremes that destroy organic material. The ground holds no water, and the sky offers none. The silence there is not peaceful, but terminal. Any attempt at sustained human settlement without external support does not merely run into hardship, it runs into the hard biological limit of what living things can endure without water. The boundary between Egypt's inhabited strip and its empty desert is not a gradual transition or a sliding scale of difficulty. It is a line, a sharp and almost instantaneous boundary where the Nile's influence ends and the Sahara's dominion begins. A boundary so abrupt you can stand with 1 foot in a green field and 1 foot in lifeless sand and feel physically the difference between a world that supports life and a world that extinguishes it. Most people understand instinctively that Egypt's population clusters around the Nile because the river provides water, and that understanding is correct as far as it goes. But it stops well short of capturing how total, how ancient, and how structurally irreversible that dependency actually is. The Nile is not simply a water source that Egypt happens to rely on. It is the single geological event that created the possibility of Egyptian civilization in the first place. It is a river that carries water from the highlands of Ethiopia and Central Africa thousands of kilometers northward through absolute desert, depositing as it goes the silt and moisture that built, over thousands of years, one of the most fertile agricultural strips in the ancient world. A strip so productive relative to its surroundings that it supported not just survival but surplus, not just subsistence, but the kind of accumulated wealth and organized complexity that built the pyramids, the temples, and the bureaucratic machinery of a civilization that lasted, in various forms, for 3,000 years. All of it, every monument and every dynasty and every philosophical, mathematical, and architectural achievement that Egypt contributed to human history was built on that 3%, on that thin green margin between the river and the rock. Which means that the geography you see on a satellite image of Egypt today is not a modern anomaly or a temporary demographic pattern. It is the same geography that has been true since before recorded history, the same concentration, the same boundary, the same fundamental equation. Water equals life, and no water equals nothing. 3,000 years of civilization, 10,000 years of human ingenuity, and every tool that modernity has placed in human hands have not yet managed to significantly rewrite that equation. But Egypt is trying, and the scale and ambition of that attempt is itself a kind of testament to how desperate the pressure on that 3% has become. 110 million people living on the agricultural land of the Nile Valley and Delta creates population densities in some areas that exceed those of the most crowded neighborhoods in Tokyo or Mumbai. It means farmland is being consumed by urban expansion at a rate that threatens the agricultural base the entire system depends on. It means a city like Cairo is sprawling outward with a relentlessness that the original geography was never designed to accommodate. Egypt has made a decision that would have seemed like science fiction a generation ago. The decision is to build an entirely new capital city from scratch in the desert, a place called the new administrative capital. It rises out of the sand roughly 50 kilometers east of Cairo at a projected cost of tens of billions of dollars. The city is designed to house millions of people on land that has no natural water, no agricultural history, no organic reason to exist where it is being built. It is, in the most literal sense possible, a political argument with geography, an attempt to use money and engineering and political will to do what the Sahara has prevented for 10,000 years. That is to make the desert livable not for a handful of people with extraordinary resources, but for an urban population at scale. And whether that argument will be won or lost is a question that engineers and urban planners and climate scientists are debating with increasing urgency as the project rises from the sand. The challenges are not merely logistical but existential. Water must be pumped from the Nile, power must be generated and transmitted, food must be grown somewhere and transported in. Every system that a city needs to function must be built artificially in a place where nature has provided none of the prerequisites. It is a reminder that building against geography is not impossible, but it is expensive in ways that compound over time and fragile in ways that only become visible under pressure. And yet, perhaps the deepest truth about Egypt's geography is not the desperation of the new capital or the density of the old delta, but something quieter and more fundamental, which is that the Nile, for all the life it has given to the people who settled along its banks, has also been a kind of prison, not a cruel one, not one built of walls or guards, but the kind that is harder to escape because it is made of necessity rather than force, because when the river provides everything and the desert provides nothing, the river becomes not just a resource but a boundary, not just a source of life but the definition of where life is permitted to exist. And the 110 million people living on 3% of Egypt are not there because they chose that 3% over the other 97%. They are there because the other 97% never gave them a choice. When you look at a map of Egypt and see that confident, misleading square, what you are actually looking at is not a country, but a river with a border drawn around it. And everything that has ever happened in Egyptian history, every war and every harvest and every prayer and every monument, happened in the thin green space where the water decided to fall.